name is Joy Allen, and today I will be presenting the case of Devonte Hart. The case was ruled as a murder-suicide, and the policy I chose to reform was CAPTA, which stands for Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. The case dealt with child welfare and family violence. For my table of contents, we have the case overview, which is the what, when, who, why, and where of the case. We have the case analysis, which deals with the social aspects, the psychological aspects, and the legal aspects. Then we have the policy reform, which is why I chose the policy and what I would like to reform, as well as the conclusions and citations. What happened? Who is Devonte Hart? In the case of Devonte Hart, he and his 5 siblings were adopted by Jennifer and Sarah Hart, who would later on inflict several years of neglect and abuse. Despite their neglect and the abuse being reported, Child Protective Services failed to do their duty of protecting the children. This further allowed for Jennifer and Sarah to continue their abuse to the point of murder-suicide in March of 2018. The case overview. Who were involved? The victims involved were Devonte Hart and his 5 siblings, Sierra, Abigail, Jeremiah, Hannah, and Marcus. The perpetrators were found to be Jennifer and Sarah Hart, their adoptive parents. Meanwhile, some people who had important roles included their grandparents, neighbors, biological family members, and CPS. When did it happen? This case took a span over many years. It started in 2008 when the first abuse was outwardly recognized and continued until 2018 when all the children passed. This case was then ruled as a murder-suicide. Where did it happen? This case took place in several different locations, which included Alexandria, Minnesota, Westland, Oregon, Woodland, Washington, and Mendocino County, California, on California State Route 1. Why did it happen? The case of Devonte Hart and his siblings was able to happen due to Child Protective Services not working hard enough to ensure that Devonte Hart and his siblings were being properly cared for. Not to mention, letting the siblings stay with their abusers even though there were several evidence of abuse reported against them. For my summary, in the case of Devonte Hart and his 5 adopted siblings, we learned that they were victims of years of extreme abuse and neglect by their adoptive parents, Jennifer and Sarah Hart. Their parents used isolation, emotional manipulation, and homeschooling to hide their actions and masquerade their true intentions upon adopting the children. The abuse was said to have started in Minnesota in the year of 2008, where a teacher found bruises on Abigail's arm. She has said that the bruises were caused by being beaten with a belt by Jennifer Hart. However, Sarah covered for Jennifer, which then led to her pleading guilty to misdemeanor domestic assault in 2011. Despite this, the children remained in their care. Later on, the family of Devonte tried to get custody of them and had them for a while. However, they were found to have broke the agreement determined by the court, which led to them returning back to Jennifer and Sarah. After moving to Oregon, neighbors reported signs of children being malnourished and dealing with emotional control, but CPS failed to act. With this, the Harts were able to escape and then move to another state. In Washington, concerns escalated when Hannah Hart jumped out of a window at 1:30 a.m. It was two stories. It was on the 2nd floor. She was found with her front teeth missing, and she was begging for help, stating that their parents were racist and abusing them. Later on, Devonte repeatedly started visiting the neighbors asking for food, stating that his mothers were withholding meals as punishment. 1 meal later on escalated into 3 meals a day. CPS attempted welfare checks in March 2018 but found the home empty as the Harts escaped once again. Days later, in Mendocino County, California, Jennifer Hart intentionally drove the family's SUV off a cliff, not only killing herself, but also Sarah and all 6 children, to which they later found out that not only was Jennifer intoxicated, but she had also drugged Sarah and the rest of the children with a sedative named diphenhydramine. This tragedy highlights the systemic failures in Child Welfare Services and the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. It also shows the inadequate investigations and the lack of coordination within the states. You can also see delayed intervention despite numerous red flags and signs of the many years of abuse. This is a quote from Sherry Davis, which is the biological mother of 3 of the Hart children, which included Devonte. They're so quick to snatch them from people like us, but once they're adopted, they don't even check on them. The significant events in this case starts with Sarah Hart domestic assault case, which happened in 2011. Minnesota. Sir Hart pleads guilty to misdemeanor as domestic assault upon a teacher finding bruises on Abigail after she complains of pain. Hannah Hart, and then it was Hannah Hart escaped for help in 2017 in Woodland, Washington. At 1:30 a.m., Hannah Hart jumps out of a second-story window and runs to a neighbor's house, pleading for help, saying that her parents are racist and abusing her and her siblings. Next, it was Devonte Hart begging the DeKalbs, which is their neighbors, for food in 2018 Woodland, Washington. Devonte Hart started visiting the neighbors for food, starting with 1 meal a day, and then it led up to 3 meals a day as well. He said his parents were withholding food from him as punishment. Then there was the attempted welfare checks by CPS from the dates of March 23rd to 26th, 2018 in Washington, which these are dates that were before their death. After the DeKalbs, which is their neighbors, had reported to CPS about the abuse and neglect, CPS tried to attempt 2 welfare checks, to which the house was empty. However, it was found that the family had fled. Then there was a murder-suicide committed by Jennifer Hart on March 26, 2018, in Mendocino County, California. It was found that Jennifer Hart intentionally drove herself and her family SUV off a 100-foot cliff, killing herself and her 6 adopted children. It was also found that the crash was deliberate due to vehicle acceleration being stuck at 90 miles per hour with no braking. Further findings of abuse and neglect. Toxicology reports stated that before and at the time of the crash, that Jennifer was intoxicated and Sarah and the 2 of the children had diphenhydramine, a sedative in their systems. Investigators also found more years of abuse and emotional manipulation. Significant details in their family dynamics. In the dynamic of the Hart family, Jennifer was said to be the dominant figure, while Sarah was more passive. It was said that Jennifer was set to give more of the punishments, even though Sarah took accountability for them. Jennifer and Sarah were said to be abusive, manipulative, and controlling. Even friends from their time of college mentioned how they had this abstract mindset and was said to be different from those around them. The Hart parents abused and neglected their adopted children, even going as far as isolating them and resorting to homeschooling them when it was reported by a teacher that one of the children were being beaten by a belt. The Harts would abuse their children, and then when the neighbors started getting concerned, they would paint an image that the children were drug babies and didn't know what they were talking about. This shows you how abusive their family dynamic was. Hannah Hart jumped out of a 2-story window, knocking out her front teeth just to go receive help from her neighbors, claiming that her parents were racist. The legal outcomes. Through this case, we can see how Child Protective Services failed to protect the Hart children, which led to their years of abuse and neglect. In addition, they claimed that they didn't have sufficient evidence in order to act. Although they removed the three of the Hart siblings from their biological family after they broke one of the rules. There was multiple reports of abuse, even to a point where Sarah was charged with assault. However, her charges were suspended, which is an even bigger failure amongst the healthcare system. It was later discovered that there was multiple years of uncovered abuse, and the coroner ruled their death a murder-suicide. Media portrayal. 1. It was carefully curated. The Hart parents crafted an image of their family as a loving unit. Social media accounts were filled with photos of the children playing outdoors and attending festivals. These posts portrayed the Harts as heroic parents who had rescued their 6 black children from abusive past. Viral photo. A widely known photo of Devonte Hart hugging a police officer at the 2014 Black Lives Matter protest became a symbol of healing, which you'll see this photo later on. This picture is celebrated as the picture we needed during a time of national unrest. However, it hid the abuse and deception that the children were facing. Exposed deception. Reports revealed that years of abuse and neglect that was hidden behind their social media. Neighbors and friends came forward with past stories of neglected children and desperate cries for help that CPS investigations that failed to intervene. Import destinations. These are destinations that the Hart family located throughout the time of them adopting the children. They start off in Alexandria, Minnesota, and this is where they adopted their children and where early signs of abuse took place. Then they moved to Westland, Oregon, and the Hart family moves here after leaving Minnesota, and reports of abuse increased. After that, it was Woodland, Washington, and the Hart family moved here in 2017, and this is where the DeKalbs witness and report the family's behavior. In Mendocino, California, this is the final destination that the Hart family traveled to before Jennifer Hart intentionally drives the family off the cliff. Case analysis. For social, we have the Harts created a perfect family image on social media through photos like Devonte's viral hug with police officers to hide their abuse. This was sought delayed intervention from CPS as authorities were misled by the positive image they were presenting. Even though neighbors reported their concerns about malnourishment and harsh punishments, their warnings were dismissed due to the family's positive image. Through the white couple adopting 6 black children, they painted themselves in the role of a savior. Psychological. The children endured food deprivation, forced isolation, and psychological and emotional manipulation. They was also coached to lie to CPS. Jennifer Hart showed narcissistic tendencies, using social media to uphold her self-image as a heroic parent, meanwhile controlling and abusing her children. The Child Abuse and Prevention and Treatment Act lacked provisions or rulings regarding homeschooling, oversight, or mandatory risk assessments for adoptive parents, which led to forced isolation for the children. Not for legal, we have not only did the workers fail to remove the children from their Hart family home, but they also failed to recognize coach responses from the children. There were no national databases existing to track abuse reports across the states, which allowed the Harts to evade scrutiny time and time again. And this is a picture that was famous, that went viral worldwide, of Devonte hugging the police. And so for this picture, there's reports and suspicions saying that the reason why Devonte is crying is not actually because he was hugging the police during this Black Lives Matter movement, but was actually because he was facing abuse and wanted to actually report his abuse but couldn't say anything. And so that's why I wrote a picture's worth 1,000 words, because you truly don't really know the meaning of the picture. Policy reform. This case revealed the systemic failures in child welfare services, including inadequate caregiver screenings. There was also signs of abuse during home visits and poor interstate coordination. We're reforming the Child Abuse Prevention Treatment Act by implementing mandatory background checks, psychological evaluations, and standardized home screens would address all the gaps in their services. Also, trauma-informed training for healthcare professionals and the use of evidence-based risk assessment tools could all allow early detection of abuse. This could also prevent families from invading authorities. These reforms move the focus from delayed intervention to proactive prevention, helping to keep vulnerable children safe. For our Reform 1, to strengthen the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, we can strengthen the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act by prioritizing preventive measures such as mandatory screenings, psychological evaluations, and enhanced home visits to detect signs of early abuse. This helps prevent tragedies like Devonte's Hart case. For another thing that we could do for our reform is also equip children welfare services, including CPS workers, with trauma-informed training as well as risk assessment tools. This also ensures that they can identify patterns of early abuse and intervene effectively before harm ensues. For our conclusion, the case of Devonte Hart and his siblings was extremely eye-opening, as it showed us the huge flaws in child welfare services and within the Child Abuse and Prevention and Treatment Act. This case in itself is an urgent call for reform not only in the Act but also in child welfare programs. We saw in this case several systemic failures. This could be seen through multiple reports of abuse, not only by school administration but also next door neighbors, yet CPS failed through their lack of coordination to properly remove their Hart children and bring them to safety. Furthermore, we also saw racial bias amongst this case as well. Due to Hart parents being white, they were able to slip through the cracks, pretending to be a happy, loving, and accepting family on social media and abusing their kids behind closed doors. This case is a call for change not only in child welfare services but within the captive policy as well. This case reveals the consequences of what happens when we delay to help those in need. As healthcare professionals, especially those within child welfare services, we should be advocating for policy reforms within CAPTA that helps them focus on prevention rather than delayed intervention. We should be collaborating amongst each other in order to detect early signs of abuse and neglect, as well as promoting education amongst the community in order to be able to recognize signs of early abuse. Thank you so much. These are my citations. And that is all for my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an amazing day.